If you own a simple S&P 500 index fund, you likely have more ownership in Goldman Sachs than the living descendants of Mr. Goldman and Mr. Sachs. Sachs combined. Forget the internet myths of a $2 trillion family dynasty. That version of the story is a fantasy. Hello, I'm Beatrice. I've always believed the most compelling histories are the quiet ones, hidden just beneath the surface. The real story here is far more human. It's about how the founders of a global empire were completely erased from their own creation. It's a story for those of us who understand that the most fascinating tales of wealth are often about what is lost. And that loss begins with a simple but profound misunderstanding. People confuse managing a fortune with owning one. It's like confusing the butler with the lord of the manor. The family's peak capital, back in 1914, was $1.6 million, around $50 million today. A fortune, yes. An empire? No. The truth is, for decades the founding families have been about as welcome at Goldman Sachs as a bacon sandwich at a bar mitzvah. But what was coming next was an extinction-level event. A single act of hubris would not only vaporize 98% of the firm's value, it would force the family to do the unthinkable, hand the keys to their kingdom over to a man who started his career as a janitor's assistant. And to understand how they could lose it all, we first have to understand what they built and why they built it the way they did. For that, we need to rewind the clock, past the crash, past the IPO, all the way back to 1848. A young man named Marcus Goldman steps off a boat from Bavaria. He's an Ashkenazi Jew in a Protestant America, an outsider from day one. For 20 years, he's a traveling merchant, a peddler with a horse and cart, learning the landscape of his new country, and more importantly, learning its people. By 1869, he's in his late 40s and plants his flag in Lower Manhattan. On a little street called Pine Street, he opens a business. He rents a tiny basement office right next to the building's coal chute. You can imagine the damp chill, the constant rumble and smell of coal dust. He'd sit there at a small desk, this lone man, and he started a business in something called commercial paper. It was simple. A local merchant needed cash today, but their customer wouldn't pay them for another 90 days. Marcus would buy that IOU at a small discount. Then he'd take these IOUs, these promises written on paper, and he'd stuff them into the lining of his tall silk hat. He'd walk up the street to a wealthier bank, sell the notes for a profit, and do it all again. His hat became a mobile vault of trust. In his first year, from that dusty basement, he handled $5 million in transactions. He wasn't building a bank, he was building relationships, one handshake at a time. The business grew, his own children joined him. But the real pivot came when his youngest daughter, Louisa, married another Bavarian immigrant, Samuel Sachs. Samuel was quiet, meticulous, the perfect counterbalance to Marcus's ambition. In 1885, the name became official, Goldman Sachs & Co., and they operated on one simple, unbreakable rule. For the next 50 years, every single partner at the firm had to be a Goldman or a Sachs by blood or by marriage. This wasn't just a preference, it was a defense mechanism. The established Protestant banks on Wall Street wouldn't touch them. They were seen as outsiders, so they built their own fortress, a fortress of kinship, where every partner was family and trust was absolute. A fortress of kinship. Sounds impenetrable, right? This is the core irony, the very thing that made them strong. This absolute trust in blood is what made them blind. They built a wall to keep enemies out. They never had a plan for when the greatest threat was already inside. The family fortress held for 50 years, but one man's vision, a single brilliant idea, would set the firm on a collision course with the 20th century and tear the Goldman and Sachs families apart forever. That man was Henry Goldman, Marcus's own son, and his vision was deceptively simple: to look beyond the fortress walls. While his father had built an empire on the trust of individual merchants, Henry saw the future. He saw a new America of giant corporations, of mass production and mass consumption. He argued the firm should stop just financing inventories and start financing the companies themselves. This was radical. It culminated in 1906 when he convinced a skeptical partnership to underwrite the IPO for a Chicago-based catalog company called Sears, Roebuck and Company. It was a colossal success, the Amazon of its day, and it pushed Goldman Sachs into the major leagues. To fuel this growth, Henry knew the fortress walls had to be breached. In 1912, he brought in the first partner who was not related by blood or marriage, a tiny hairline fracture in a 50-year-old dam. But the crack that shattered the family came in 1917.
As America prepared to enter World War I, Henry, who had deep cultural ties to Germany, argued for neutrality. The Sachs family, fiercely patriotic, saw this as nothing short of betrayal. The argument wasn't about profits or strategy, it was a raw, volcanic clash of identity. A line was drawn in the firm's private dining room, and by the end of it, Henry Goldman was out. He was forced to resign, taking his capital, his vision, and his branch of the family name with him. The Sachs family was now in sole control of a firm where the name Goldman was already becoming a ghost. Losing one branch of the family was brutal, but what came next was an extinction-level event. A single act of hubris was about to vaporize 98% of the firm's value. It would force the family to do the unthinkable: hand the keys to their kingdom over to a man who started his career as a janitor's assistant. That act of hubris had a name: the Goldman Sachs Trading Corporation. It was the brainchild of a charismatic partner, Waddell Catchings, and it was a creature of the Roaring Twenties. The idea was simple and dangerously seductive. Goldman Sachs would use its own money and the public's to invest directly in the stock market. But it became a house of cards. Imagine the trading corp buys stocks. Then it creates a second company, Shenandoah, to buy shares of the first. Then a third company, Blue Ridge, to buy shares of the second. Each layer built on nothing but debt and air, a skyscraper of leverage piercing the clouds. In the summer of 1929, its stock hit $326 a share. Then came October. The ticking clock of the market stopped. The crash wasn't a slide, it was a fall from a great height. The entire paper tower disintegrated. The stock of the Goldman Sachs Trading Corporation plummeted from $326 to just $1.75. 98% of its value vaporized. The firm was on the brink of annihilation. In the ensuing panic, the Sachs family faced their ruin, and they did the unthinkable. They turned to the one man they believed could save them, Sidney Weinberg, the man who had started as a janitor's assistant for $3 a week, cleaning spittoons. Now they were handing him the keys to their kingdom. And he did it. Over the next 39 years, Weinberg rebuilt Goldman Sachs into a powerhouse. He was a kingmaker, an advisor to presidents. He restored the firm's name. So the outsider, the former janitor's assistant, saves the day. A Hollywood ending, right? Wrong. This is where the story turns from tragedy to a cold corporate execution. Weinberg's cure was a slow-acting poison for the family's legacy. He saved the firm, but he did it by instituting a brutal meritocracy. He brought in the sharpest minds, men who owed their loyalty to him and the firm, not to a family name. With every new partner,
the Sachs family's ownership stake was diluted, their control slowly bleeding out, cut by cut. Weinberg paved the way for the one event that would legally and permanently delete the founders' ghosts from their own machine, the initial public offering. In 1999, the partners voted. The old partnership, the one Marcus Goldman had built on a handshake and a tall hat, was dissolved. Goldman Sachs became a public company. The IPO made 221 partners multi-millionaires overnight.
The firm's name was etched onto the New York Stock Exchange, but the family name was gone from the books. So who owns Goldman Sachs now? The answer is more bizarre and soulless than you can imagine. It involves faceless algorithms, a CEO who moonlights as a festival DJ, and a final, crushing irony for the families who started it all. The largest owners of Goldman Sachs today aren't people at all. Not in the way Marcus Goldman was a person. They are systems, vast, silent oceans of capital managed by algorithms. The top 3 shareholders are Vanguard with about 8.9%, BlackRock with 7.2%, and State Street with 5.9%. These are not families, they are faceless index funds and asset managers.
Their decisions are driven by data points and market signals, a world away from Marcus Goldman, who built his empire by looking a man in the eye and judging his character before accepting his IOU. And the culture. The CEO who sits in the throne that Sidney Weinberg built is a man named David Solomon. He is a brilliant banker. He is also a professional DJ who plays sets at music festivals under the name DJ D Soul. This isn't just a funny detail, it's a symbol. It is the final cultural departure from the quiet, sober, immigrant work ethic that the firm was built on. It's a leap into a new world of personal brands and spectacle. And what of the descendants of Goldman and Sachs? They were erased, more thoroughly than a fallen figure from an old Soviet photograph. They hold no power, they have no significant shares. They are architects, doctors, and academics living ordinary lives. They can walk past the gleaming glass tower on 200 West Street, the headquarters of the firm their ancestors built, and they are nothing more than anonymous pedestrians, ghosts in their own story. It is a ghost story, told in the clean, cold sans serif font of a corporate filing. So the ghosts were exorcised, the family was replaced. But what does this transformation from a man with a hat full of promises to a server farm trading in nanoseconds truly tells us about the soul of capitalism itself? Perhaps it tells us that sometimes the fortresses we build to protect ourselves become the very walls that lock us out. The journey from Marcus Goldman's hat, filled with personal trust, to the faceless, algorithmic power of an index fund is more than a business case study. It's a quiet story about what is gained and what is irrevocably lost in the name of growth. The firm, founded as a refuge from an exclusive world, ultimately became so successful it had no room for its own founding family. A ghost story told in the sans serif font of a stock ticker. I'm deeply curious to hear your perspective on this. Were you aware of the story behind the actual families involved in Goldman Sachs, or is this your first time hearing about them? I look forward to reading your thoughts below. And if you, like me, believe history's most beautiful stories are often the ones hidden in the margins, I invite you to subscribe and join our quiet corner of the internet. There are so many more to uncover together.